On that quiet Monday morning, Eleanor woke earlier than usual. The sun was still peeking timidly through the flowered curtains in the living room. It was the kind of day when everything seemed the same, until it wasn't. Something was in the air, a strange sense of foreboding, as if God were whispering that something momentous was about to happen. And she felt it deep in her chest. She put her kettle on to boil, as she had for over 40 years, always at the same time. As she waited, she glanced at the empty armchair beside the fireplace. The absence of Harold, her late husband, seemed even more pronounced at that moment. There was too much silence in that house, a silence that screamed. And at that very second, the phone rang. The ringing of the phone made her heart skip a beat. It wasn't common to receive calls so early in the morning. She hesitated for a moment before answering. A trembling voice on the other end of the line begged for help. It was her grandson, Lucas. And before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all His infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for He will never abandon us, for His love is eternal and infinite. I also want to take this opportunity to ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me a lot, thank you. Lucas cried like he had when he was little and fell off his bike. But now he was a grown man, in his early 20s, with a deep voice and a confused soul. He said just 3 words, "Grandma, help me." That was all she needed to hear. She dropped her tea, put on her shoes, and ran to the car, not even knowing where she was going. The smell of rain on the asphalt began to waft up as she pulled out. The sky was closing in, but Eleanor wasn't afraid. Instead, something inside her was awakening, as if her entire life had prepared her for this moment. As she drove, memories of raising her children without money or support surfaced. And now, her grandson, in danger? The call had cut off shortly after. She tried to return it, but it only went to voicemail. This made everything even more awkward. Lucas never called. He was a reserved young man, almost always missing from social media and college parties. But Eleanor always sensed when he needed her. It was a grandmother thing. As she passed the corner of Main Street and Willow Avenue, she saw Mr. Thompson's old store, closed for years. It jogged her memory. That was where Lucas had bought his first school backpack. Now he was in danger, and all she knew was that she had to find him. And something told her time was running out. Suddenly, a black car stopped on the other side of the street. The tinted windows obscured the person inside. Eleanor squinted. The car looked familiar, but she couldn't place it. When she tried to get closer, it sped off. That thought kept ringing in her mind. Arriving home again, Eleanor noticed the back door was ajar. A shiver ran down her spine. She'd lived here for over 20 years and never left doors open. She took a deep breath, grabbed the sturdy cane she used only on hikes, and walked slowly inside. The silence was heavy. Inside the house, everything seemed in place, except for one thing: the family picture frame was upside down. She swallowed hard. That frame never fell over on its own. It was as if someone was trying to send a message. Something dark, personal. And she knew it had to do with Lucas. In his room, there was still a box of old toys. Eleanor opened it, searching for clues, any sign. Among the broken cars and old figurines, she found a carefully folded piece of paper. It was a letter. But it wasn't written by Lucas. It was from Harold, her husband, written in the 1980s. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Her hand trembled as she opened it. In the letter, Harold spoke of a secret, something he'd never even told her. He said that one day, the past would come back to collect. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, trying to understand. It was as if all the pieces were moving. At the bottom of the letter was a name, Jeremiah Stone. She'd never heard of him. But the next sentence made her freeze. If Lucas is in danger, look for Jeremiah. He'll know what to do. Eleanor sensed this wasn't just a message. It was a mission from a husband who seemed to have foreseen everything. Without a second thought, she grabbed her keys again and began searching through records. In old papers in the basement, she found a list of names related to Harold's time in the army. Jeremiah Stone was there. Last known address, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. A long drive. But she didn't hesitate. Before leaving, something drew her up to the attic. There, inside a dusty box, she found an old photo. It was of Harold and Jeremiah, in uniform, hugging and smiling. But behind it was something handwritten. "If you ever need help, go to the blue house with the white windows. Don't tell anyone." Eleanor shivered. The phone rang again. She rushed to answer it, but it was an unknown number. She answered anyway. A deep, masculine voice said simply, "Don't go to Louisiana. It's not for you." And he hung up. Fear nearly paralyzed her, but it was replaced by calm anger. No one was threatening her family. She kept the letter and the photo and took out the old diary she'd kept since the 1960s. There she wrote, "If anything happens to me, I'm doing it for Lucas. God is my strength." She locked the house and left. She didn't tell anyone. It was now her against the world. And her faith was all she had. On the way, she stopped at an old roadside diner. She ordered coffee and noticed an elderly couple smiling. It reminded her of the happy days with Harold. She didn't know what awaited her, but she felt that each step was guided by something greater. A force that came from above. From God. And from within her. A truck driver approached, offering help. He said he was heading to Baton Rouge. Eleanor hesitated, but something in his gaze seemed sincere. She accepted the ride. And along the road, she began to tell her story. He listened attentively, as if he already knew what she was talking about. During the trip, the trucker revealed something unexpected. He knew Harold. They had served together. He said Harold had once saved his life in an ambush, and that the name Jeremiah Stone was feared even by the bravest soldiers. Eleanor fell silent, digesting it all. There was much more to this story. The trucker told her that Jeremiah disappeared after a secret mission in the 1980s. And that, according to rumors, he knew too much. This only increased Eleanor's urgency. Lucas was involved in something big. And somehow, it all led back to that man. Jeremiah was the key. They reached the state border at night. The dark sky seemed to hide more than just clouds. The sense of danger was real. Eleanor said a silent prayer, asking for divine protection. She remembered her mother's words, "When all seems lost, look up." That's what she was doing. Near Baton Rouge, they stopped for gas. A man in a suit watched from afar. When Eleanor looked in his direction, he turned away. But she sensed he recognized her. Or worse, that he was following her. She got in the car and told the trucker to get out of there as quickly as possible. On the way, the radio began to crackle. And suddenly, an old song began to play, "You Are My Sunshine." It was the song Harold sang to her on stormy nights. Eleanor didn't believe in coincidences. This was a sign that she was on the right path. The truck driver glanced in the rearview mirror and said they were being followed. Eleanor's heart raced. They needed to lose that car. On a dirt road, they made a sharp turn. And for a moment, they lost the trail. But Eleanor knew, someone didn't want her to find Jeremiah. When they reached the small town north of Baton Rouge, Eleanor got out and thanked the truck driver. He handed her a note with a phone number. "Call me if you need anything. My name is Frank." She tucked the note away carefully. She knew she would still need help. And that this story was just beginning. The door to the blue house creaked slowly as Eleanor pushed cautiously. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet, and the smell of mildew and ancient memories filled her nostrils. The room was empty, but there were clear signs of recent presence: a half-empty glass of water, an open book on the table. She whispered, "Jeremiah." No answer. Only piercing silence. With light steps, she walked down the hallway until she found a staircase leading to the basement. It was dark, but she felt a strange call coming from below. It was as if forgotten memories were pulling her back to the past. Hesitantly, she turned on an old lantern hanging on the wall. The light trembled, as did her hands. As she descended the first few steps, a shiver ran down her spine. The air there seemed denser, thick with untold stories. The basement was filled with stacked boxes, old papers, and furniture covered with sheets. She bent down to examine the first box and, lifting the cloth, found an old portrait of Jeremiah and Harold. They were younger than she had imagined. Beside the photograph was a military badge bearing the name J. Stone. That confirmed everything. But what caught her attention most was an iron box locked with a rusty padlock. On top, a hand-carved cross. Eleanor sensed something sacred there. The kind of thing you don't open without praying first. And so she did. With a brief prayer, he asked for protection and wisdom. He used an old key he found hanging on a nearby hook and, with effort, managed to open it. Inside were secret documents, maps, and coded notes. But among it all, one folder caught his eye. It was marked Operation Redemption. His heart nearly stopped. She opened the folder and found files about a mission from the 1980s, involving secret agents and ordinary civilians who had been used as shields. Harold's name was there, along with Jeremiah's and 5 other soldiers, all presumed dead. But Eleanor knew Harold had returned alive. So what really happened? Among the papers was a yellowed sheet of paper with a list of coordinates. One of the dots marked the town where Lucas was born. Another, an abandoned rural area in Mississippi. There were also old aerial photographs and satellite imagery. Most intriguing was a handwritten message: "If anything happens to me, give this to Eleanor. She'll know what to do." She clapped her hands over her mouth in disbelief. Harold had prepared everything. It was as if he knew she would one day have to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And as incredible as it seemed, she was doing just that. This wasn't just another search for Lucas. It was something much bigger, much deeper. Suddenly, a noise upstairs made her freeze. Slow, heavy footsteps. Someone was there. She turned off the flashlight and hid behind a bookshelf. The sound was approaching the stairs. Each step clicked like a countdown. Eleanor held her breath. The fear was real, but her faith was greater. The figure descended slowly, but something about his gait was familiar. When the man reached the bottom step, Eleanor recognized him. It was Jeremiah. Older, with a gray beard, but his eyes, they were the same as in the photo. He looked at her and said quietly, "You really came." She burst into tears. Jeremiah helped Eleanor up and led her to an antique chair. He offered her hot tea and began to explain. She said Harold trusted her more than anyone, and that everything hidden in that basement was for her protection. But now, with Lucas in danger, she needed to know the whole truth. He explained that Operation Redemption was a clandestine mission gone wrong. Innocent lives were lost. And to cover up the mistakes, the government decided to erase all records. But Harold and Jeremiah kept the evidence, hoping to one day reveal everything. But the truth came at a price. Those who tried to expose the facts mysteriously disappeared. Jeremiah hid for decades. And Harold pretended to move on, but he never stopped investigating. When Lucas was born, his former enemies began to watch from afar. He was the link. The final link. And now, he knew too much. Eleanor tried to process everything as tears streamed down her face. Lucas was in danger from something he didn't even know about. And there was only one way to save him: find the other survivors of the mission. Jeremiah handed her a list of 3 names. One of them lived in a nearby town. Another, no one knew where he was. The third, dead for 2 years. She stood up determinedly. She said she needed to act quickly. But Jeremiah grabbed her arm and revealed something even more frightening. Lucas hadn't called by accident. Someone had forced him to make that call, as a warning or a trap. Eleanor felt her blood run cold. They were trying to use her. That night, she slept right there in the basement, surrounded by files and maps. She dreamed of Harold, smiling, saying, "You're stronger than you think, Ellie." She woke before dawn with a thought. She needed to get home. Something in her basement, that she had completely forgotten, now made sense. Jeremiah handed her a suitcase filled with all the essential documents. He told her to go to the old, abandoned military base where it all began. There, perhaps she would find what remained of the truth. But he warned her, "Don't go alone. They're watching you. And they know you're getting too close." On the way back, Eleanor stopped at a roadside church. She sat in the last pew, lit a candle, and prayed. She asked for wisdom, protection, and discernment. The pastor, a friendly man named Ben, approached and offered a hug. She wept silently, relieved by a moment of peace. Before leaving, Pastor Ben handed her a small wooden crucifix. "This belonged to my mother," he said. "She said that when everything gets too dark, this will remind you who's in control." Eleanor clutched the object tightly. She felt stronger now, and ready. When he arrived home, he noticed something was out of place. The kitchen curtain had been torn. A window was ajar. He entered cautiously and realized someone had rummaged through his things. But strangely, the old trunk in the basement remained intact. He went to it, and when he opened it, he understood why. There, hidden beneath old blankets, was Harold's diary, complete. She thought he'd lost it in the moving, but he always knew she'd find it when the time was right. And that time was now. When she opened the diary, the first page read, "To my Ellie. If you're reading this, it's because the time has come." Those words made her hands tremble. It was as if he were there, on the other side of the words, guiding every step. In the following pages, Harold recounted everything, from the early days of the mission to the recent threats, including names, dates, and a photo of Lucas as a baby, with a strange mark on his arm. Eleanor ran to the family album. In the original photo, the mark wasn't there. This meant the image in the diary was different. Edited, forged. Or was it the real thing, hidden all this time? A question lingered in her mind. And worse, what did that mark mean? She made copies of everything and sent them to the number Frank, the trucker, had given her. She asked for help verifying the authenticity of the files. He quickly replied, "I'm on my way. Don't open anything else until I get there." This startled her. But it also confirmed she wasn't alone in this. While she waited, she sat in Harold's armchair. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Everything was falling into place. But something was still missing. Something hidden, perhaps not just in the basement, but inside her. A feeling, a memory, an intuition. And she knew. She was so close to finding it. Lucas has always been a free spirit. From an early age, he showed signs of restlessness, as if the world were too small to contain his dreams. As a teenager, he began to distance himself from his family, especially after the death of his mother, Eleanor's youngest daughter. It was as if that emptiness had opened a hole no one could fill. And the more Eleanor tried to get closer, the further he drifted away. He moved to Denver when he turned 18, saying he needed to breathe a different air. Eleanor supported him, even though her heart was broken. She called every Sunday, but sometimes it just went to voicemail. Other times, he answered in a hurry, saying he was busy. Even so, she prayed for him every day, with faith that one day he would return. What Eleanor didn't know was that Lucas had become involved with an activist group that claimed to fight for justice, but whose actions went beyond what was acceptable. It began with peaceful protests, but soon came secret meetings, suspicious trips, and money deposited by unknown individuals. He told no one. He thought he was protecting his grandmother. Little did he know how deeply he was sinking. At one of these meetings, someone mentioned the name Harold. Lucas was confused. That was his grandfather's name, a man he'd barely known. He asked, and the answer was curt, "Your grandfather was one of them." But he switched sides. This obsessed him. He began searching online archives, military records, anything. And the more he discovered, the more he realized he was dealing with something dangerous. The morning he called Eleanor, he had just escaped an ambush. He was locked in a motel room in Amarillo, Texas. His face was bruised, his clothes were dirty, his heart was racing. His friends were gone. And an anonymous voice on the phone said, "Either you hand over your grandfather's files, or you'll be next." That's when he dialed the only person he truly trusted. "Grandma, help me." Those 3 words carried despair, fear, and regret, but also a spark of faith. It was as if, amidst the chaos, his heart still knew where to run. Eleanor listened attentively. She asked for the address. But before he could tell her, the line went dead. And his cell phone disappeared. The next day, Lucas tried calling again, but her number didn't answer. She was out of range. He began to despair. He tried to access his online account, but it was blocked. He tried to send an email, but it bounced back as non-existent. It was as if he were being digitally erased. and the paranoia began to grow. On impulse, he decided to return to his grandmother's house. He rented a car with the little money he had left and hit the road. During the trip, he realized he was being followed. A gray sedan with tinted windows appeared in his rearview mirror at regular intervals. He tried to lose it, but the car was always there. Always. It was then that he stopped at a gas station to use the restroom. When he returned, he found a note stuck to the windshield. "You can't run from blood." The words chilled him. There was no signature, only a strange mark, a broken cross. He didn't understand the symbol, but he sensed it signified something ancient. Something Eleanor might recognize. Meanwhile, Eleanor waited for Frank, the truck driver, at her house. She still held Harold's diary, thinking about the words he'd written about Lucas. "He has fire in his eyes, Ellie. But he'll need your light to keep from getting burned." She understood now. Lucas was at the center of everything, and his role was more important than she'd ever imagined. Frank arrived that afternoon, bringing equipment Eleanor didn't quite understand: scanners, signal jammers, an old laptop. He had worked as a military technician and now helped former veterans with secret causes. He said Lucas's situation was serious, and that the group he was part of had been under surveillance for years. They set up a small base in the basement. Eleanor never imagined her home would become an operations center. Frank began cross-referencing Harold's diary with intelligence he still had access to. He discovered patterns, locations, and, most importantly, a possible escape route for Lucas. But they had to act fast. Lucas, meanwhile, had arrived a few kilometers from his grandmother's house. But when he stopped to fill up again, he saw something that made him freeze. One of the men in the group, someone he thought was his ally, was at the gas station, watching him from afar. He got in the car and drove off, tires screeching. Now he was sure they were trying to silence him. He reached the town entrance but decided not to go straight to Eleanor's house. He parked in a nearby field and hid the car behind an old barn. He turned on a disposable phone that still worked and sent an encrypted message to the only contact he considered trustworthy. 5 minutes later, he received a reply: "Confirm identity," with the phrase, "The light shines brightest in the dark." He typed the phrase. On the other end, Frank received confirmation and alerted Eleanor. "It's him. He's close." They decided to keep the house lights off. Eleanor went to the porch and placed a lit lantern in a jar as a signal. Minutes later, Lucas appeared around the side of the house, his face drawn and his eyes teary. Eleanor ran and hugged him as if for the last time. He cried like a child. He apologized for everything. He said he never imagined his quest for justice would put his grandmother's life at risk. Eleanor hugged him tighter. "You're my grandson, and I would do it all over again to protect you." In that moment, time stood still. But not for long. Frank warned them they needed to get out of there. They grabbed the essentials: the files, the diary, clothes, food. Lucas told her everything he knew about the group: the names, the places, and especially the mark of the broken cross. Eleanor then remembered. It was the symbol of a clandestine group that hunted deserters from Operation Redemption. Those who knew too much. They decided to head to Mississippi, to the location marked with the coordinates in Harold's journal. There, perhaps they would find answers, or more questions. The journey would be long. But for the first time, Eleanor was not alone. She had Lucas. And the mission Harold had left behind now had a new purpose. Along the way, Lucas revealed something unexpected. There was a third group watching everything. Neither allies nor enemies, but watchers. People who wanted to expose the truth, but who would only act when everything was about to fall apart. And he had contact with one of them. Her name was Grace. A woman. Elderly. And she said she had been engaged to Jeremiah decades ago. Eleanor was shocked. Another woman involved? That changed everything. Grace could be the key to understanding what was really behind this operation, and why Lucas had been chosen, or perhaps marked, so early on. But to find Grace, they would have to go back even further in time. The town where Grace lived no longer existed on the map. It had been flooded after the construction of a dam in the 1990s. But Eleanor remembered Harold's stories about this woman who, he said, had vanished in time. Lucas insisted She's alive. I'm sure. And Eleanor believed. Faith now united them. They headed for Mississippi as night fell, crossing dirt roads, dense forests, and ghost towns. On the radio, the same song kept playing, "You Are My Sunshine." It was like a wake-up call, a reminder that love was stronger than fear. Eleanor held Lucas's hand. They were in this together, and that was enough. But when they reached the designated location, they found something that took their breath away, an abandoned cabin, with a candle lit in the window, as if someone was waiting for them. Eleanor got out of the car first. Lucas stayed behind, and as they entered the cabin, they heard a faint voice say, "They took a while, but they came." The cabin looked like something out of an old dream or an unresolved nightmare. The wooden walls creaked with every step, as if echoing the memories of those who had lived there. Grace sat in a rocking chair, wrapped in a faded crochet shawl. Her eyes were clear as ice, but there was fire in them. When Eleanor entered, Grace smiled and said, "You look just like him." Eleanor didn't know what to say. This woman was real. And she knew Harold. Grace pointed to a box beside the fireplace and said, "He asked me to keep this, decades ago. He said one day, the woman of his life would come for it." Opening the box, Eleanor found cassette tapes, sealed letters, and a small Bible. On the cover, the initials H.W. While Eleanor absorbed the moment, Lucas remained outside, observing the woods surrounding the cabin. Something was bothering him. A heavy silence, unlike what he was used to. Birds didn't sing. The wind didn't blow. He sensed they were being watched. And he was right. From the top of the hill, two men watched the cabin with binoculars. They communicated by radio, in code. One of them said, "Confirmed." The grandmother, the grandson, and the witness. Awaiting order. The order didn't take long. Advance on signal. But don't kill anyone. Yet. The threat approached, stealthily. Inside the cabin, Grace recounted the details of the operation. She said Jeremiah never forgot her, but stepped aside to protect her. And that Harold, upon discovering the command's dark plans, vowed to end it all one day. He was a good man. And brave. But what we faced was bigger than all of us. She talked about a group called The Circle, made up of military men, businessmen, and politicians who controlled information, erased history, and manipulated heroes like Harold. The symbol of the broken cross was their hallmark. Eleanor remembered the note left in Lucas's car. It was the same symbol. Now, everything made sense. Lucas rushed in, panting. "Someone's out there." Two men. Armed. Eleanor froze. Grace stood up with surprising agility for someone her age. "Let's go around back." They exited through a hidden door behind a bookshelf. An underground tunnel led to a clearing in the forest. As they ran through the tunnel, Eleanor clutched the Bible to her chest. She felt God guiding them. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," she whispered. Lucas, his eyes watchful, shielded her with his body. Grace walked ahead, as if she knew every stone along the way. Upstairs, the men stormed the cabin. They found the fireplace still warm and Grace's chair rocking by itself. "They've escaped," one of them said. "But they won't get far." A third man appeared, different from the others. Older, with an air of command. He had a silver crucifix hanging around his neck, and eyes as cold as steel. This man, known only as Senior Black, was responsible for finding the deviants, those who escaped Operation Redemption and threatened to reveal the truth. He looked at the open box and smiled. "Finally, they found what we needed." He grabbed one of the cassettes and left without another word. Meanwhile, Eleanor, Lucas, and Grace arrived at a house hidden in the woods. There, an old acquaintance awaited them, Jeremiah. He had received a warning from Grace and prepared the hiding place. Upon seeing Eleanor, he bowed his head in respect. "He was right about you." Emotion filled the room. Jeremiah explained that Mr. Black had been his superior, a cruel man who believed the greater good justified any sacrifice. "He hunted me for years. But now he wants Lucas." Eleanor asked why. Jeremiah calmly replied, "Because he carries something he doesn't even know. A password. A code that can only be activated by DNA. The revelation fell like a bombshell. Lucas was the key to releasing the final files of the operation. Files that would incriminate powerful figures to this day. Eleanor felt the weight of responsibility, but also the confirmation that she was on the right path. God brought us here for a reason. Outside, drones began to circle the forest. The hideout had been compromised. Jeremiah handed Lucas a small, metal-shaped device. This contains part of the code. The rest is inside you. Lucas didn't immediately understand. Your blood. Your heritage. Your grandfather hid this from you since birth. There was no more time. They had to flee again. But this time, Lucas didn't want to run. He wanted to face it. They have to pay for what they did to my grandfather. To my mother. To everyone. Eleanor took his hand. But not with hate, son. With justice. And wisdom. God shows us the right path, even when the world tries to blind us. The escape was intense. Helicopters began to fly overhead. Jeremiah activated a jamming system to delay their location. Grace, even tired, said, "Don't give up now. We're closer than ever." And there they were, 3 elderly men and a young man, fleeing the largest military conspiracy in recent American history. During the night, they took shelter in an abandoned church. Eleanor sat at the altar and prayed aloud. "Lord, protect us. Show us the next step. Give us the strength to finish what we started." Lucas knelt beside her for the first time in years. He said, "Grandma, I believe. Now I believe." The next morning, they received an anonymous warning. "The circle knows where you are. Go to the abandoned radio station. Broadcast the truth." It was risky, but it was their chance to spread the data before it was erased. Jeremiah agreed. "It's now or never." They left at dawn. Along the way, Lucas told Eleanor about a recurring dream he'd had since childhood. In it, he was running through a field, with voices calling his name, and a shadow trying to grab him. "Now I understand. It was Mr. Black. It was always him." Eleanor wiped away a tear. "But you always ran, and you always made it home." When they arrived at the radio station, they found everything covered in dust, but the equipment still worked. Frank, the truck driver, was already there with reinforcements. "It was time to return the favor, Eleanor." They began to put together their plan. They would broadcast the files live, with images, evidence, and confessions recorded by Harold. But time was short. Radar showed helicopters were only 30 minutes away. They divided the duties. Grace and Frank would handle external security. Jeremiah and Lucas would prepare the files. Eleanor would be the voice of truth. She sat at the microphone and began speaking. "My name is Eleanor Williams. I'm a grandmother, a widow, a woman of faith. And today, I'm going to tell the truth that many have tried to hide." The broadcast began. The tapes played. The images appeared. Thousands of listeners tuned in, first out of curiosity, then out of indignation. It was the beginning of the revolution. But Mr. Black wouldn't give up so easily. He ordered an all-out attack. And when they reached the station, something unexpected happened. The townspeople, alerted by the broadcast, formed a human chain around the station. "If you want to silence the truth, you'll have to go through all of us," said an elderly woman, arm in arm with other women from the local church. Eleanor watched with tears in her eyes. The city that once seemed asleep now rose courageously. Lucas held the microphone tightly. "We thought we were alone, but good is never alone." And so, on that cloudy morning, the dark threat found its light. But there was still more to come. The sun was just beginning to rise on the horizon when Eleanor found, among the radio station's boxes, a yellowed envelope with her name handwritten on it. The handwriting was familiar, unmistakable. Harold. But it didn't make sense. She'd read every letter he'd left. This one, however, seemed different, and it was hidden under the false bottom of an old suitcase. Her heart raced. With trembling hands, she broke the time-worn seal. The first line read, "If you're reading this, Ellie, then they're closer than ever." Her throat tightened. It was as if Harold were there, speaking directly to her, cutting through the years, the pain, and the silence. All these years, I've protected you as best I could. But there are things I've had to hide, even from you. Not for lack of love, but for too much of it. Eleanor sat on the floor, the letter in her lap. Lucas came over and knelt beside her. "Is it from Grandpa?" he asked. She simply nodded, her eyes filling with tears. The letter continued with stunning revelations. Harold had not only participated in Operation Redemption, he had been responsible for preventing part of it from happening. He had sabotaged a plan involving testing on innocent civilians. And for this, he had been hunted, persecuted, and declared killed in action by those who sought his silence. They wanted me gone, and I let them. I created a new identity, but I came back years later when I thought it was safe. Everything I've experienced with you since then has been real, Ellie. But the danger never went away. Eleanor remembered the time Harold returned from the war. Quieter, more tense, different. Now she understood why. The letter also mentioned Grace. And the truth hit her like a punch in the gut. Harold and Grace had fallen in love during their mission years. But when he thought he'd never see Eleanor again, he thought his life would take a different path. "But you've always been my home, Ellie. Always." Those words echoed deeply in her heart. Eleanor closed her eyes and took a deep breath. There was pain there, yes. But there was also a greater truth. Harold did everything he did out of love, protection, loyalty. And now, even after so many years, she felt a sense of forgiveness. Because true love doesn't fade. It endures. Even when time tries to erase it. At the end of the letter was a hand-drawn map with coordinates and an X marked on an abandoned field in rural Alabama. Harold had written, "There lies the last file. The one that can bring everything down. But be careful. Whoever gets there will have to make a choice." Eleanor knew what she had to do. Lucas read the letter beside his grandmother. When he finished, he said nothing for a few seconds. Then he looked at her and said, "Grandma, he didn't run away. He fought. And now we're going to finish this fight." Eleanor smiled, even with red eyes. "Together, my love. With God on our side, no one will stop us." They gathered the group, Jeremiah, Grace, Frank, and 3 other locals who had joined the cause after the broadcast. The town was now a stronghold of resistance. But the map was clear. The next step would be far, risky, and possibly final. Everyone knew the stakes. Jeremiah confirmed the coordinates. He said the field in Alabama was used as a storage base for confidential files. If Harold hid something there, then it's something big. Something they want to erase forever. Grace, her voice firm, added, "And that's why we're going there. And we're going to get the truth out of the land." The drive to Alabama was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Eleanor held the map in one hand and the wooden crucifix in the other. She said small prayers as she gazed out the window at the scenery. The feeling was the same as when she took Lucas to school for the first time. A fear mixed with hope. When they reached the designated location, they found only a dry field with tall weeds and no visible buildings. But the map indicated something buried. They began digging, taking turns. Hours later, they hit something metal. An old, heavy safe, with a symbol etched into the lid, a broken cross, but with a crack of light etched around it. Inside the safe was a steel box with numbered seals and a small digital screen. Lucas approached and placed the medallion Jeremiah had given him weeks earlier. The screen lighted up. An electronic voice said, "Identity confirmed. Genetic code match. Access authorized." That was it. Lucas was the key. The safe slowly opened, revealing dozens of tapes, hard drives, and printed files. Reports on illegal experiments, the names of politicians and military personnel involved, and audio recordings of secret meetings. Everything was documented, with dates, locations, and most impressively, videos of Harold confronting members of the Circle. Eleanor fell to her knees, overcome with emotion. "You did it, my love. Even after everything, you did it." Jeremiah reviewed the documents and said, "This is more than enough to take them to the International Tribunal." But Grace, ever cautious, warned, "They won't go down without a fight. Brace yourselves." As they were organizing the files, they heard the sound of an engine. A helicopter was approaching. It was Mr. Black. But something was different. He wasn't coming with weapons. He was coming with journalists. Reporters who had received an anonymous signal from the radio station. The truth was about to be revealed to the world. Or so it seemed. When the helicopter landed, Mr. Black descended alone. He carried a briefcase and wore the same cold expression as always. But as he approached, he stopped and said, "I've come to negotiate." Everyone fell silent. "You have something that shouldn't exist. But I have something you want." He opened the briefcase. Inside were photos of Harold. Alive. Eleanor nearly fell backward. Is he alive?" Mr. Black just smiled. "Maybe. Maybe not. But I can take you to him. On one condition." Lucas lunged forward, furious. "You have no business negotiating anything." But Eleanor held up her hand, urging calm. She wanted to hear, and needed to know. The truth came at a price. Mr. Black continued, "If you publicize this, it will be war. But if you destroy everything and disappear, I'll give you Harold's whereabouts. In exchange, you return to your normal lives. Simple as that." The offer hung in the air like poison. Eleanor looked at Lucas, then at the map, then at the sky, and whispered, "Lord, guide me." At that moment, something unexpected happened. Grace stood up and said, "Enough with the evil deal." She pressed a button on her coat. A live broadcast began at that instant. The news crew was recording everything. Mr. Black was exposed. And Eleanor's decision was no longer a secret. The evidence was delivered. The images spread across the country. Headlines, protests, investigations. Eleanor became a symbol of courage. But still, one question lingered. What about Harold? Days later, a letter arrived in her hands. No return address. It simply said, "I'm still here. Proud of you, Ellie. Follow the light." She kept the letter in the same place where the first one had been. And she understood, deep in her heart, that she might never see him again. But knowing he still existed, somewhere, was enough. Because love, true love, never dies. It only changes form. And sometimes, it returns in the form of faith. The lights in the house were off. Eleanor, Lucas, and Grace had returned to the city after delivering the files. The house seemed quieter than ever, even with so much going on outside. Protests, headlines, investigations. But inside, there was only the sound of the wall clock ticking. And the weariness in their bones. Lucas slept on the couch, the newspaper open on his chest. Eleanor was making chamomile tea in the kitchen. Grace was reading from an old Bible, underlining verses with a dull pencil. Outside, night was falling heavily, with a strange wind howling through the cracks in the windows. Everything seemed calm, until it wasn't. It was around 2 in the morning when the first noise came. A soft crackling sound from the back porch. Eleanor paused with the kettle in her hands. It wasn't the sound of wood creaking in the wind. It was something more precise, like the sound of a boot slowly hitting the wooden floorboards. She turned off the stove and walked slowly into the living room. Grace looked at her and said softly, "You felt it too, didn't you?" Eleanor just nodded. Lucas continued sleeping, oblivious to what was happening. The two of them went to the window. In the darkness, they could barely see anything. But there was a shadow standing near the tree in the backyard. A male silhouette. Motionless. Watching. Eleanor grabbed the flashlight and pointed it toward the shadow. But when she turned it on, there was no one there. The tree was there, swaying in the wind. Nothing else. Grace swallowed hard. "We're not alone." Eleanor felt something in her chest. A weight. A presence. As if someone were trying to enter without knocking. Suddenly, an envelope was pushed under the door. No footsteps, no sound of anyone moving away. Just the envelope, sitting there, as if it had magically appeared. Lucas woke to the sound of the door creaking. He saw the scene and jumped up. What happened? Eleanor pointed to the floor. Lucas took the envelope carefully. It was sealed with red wax, and there was a symbol on it, a cross, but it wasn't broken. It was whole. "This is different," Grace said. Eleanor stepped closer. Is this a new group? Lucas looked at them. Or maybe an answer. They slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a single sentence written in black ink. The trial begins at dawn. Nothing else. No signature. No instructions. Just that sentence that left more questions than answers. Eleanor felt the hairs on her arms stand on end. Frank was called in a hurry. He arrived within 20 minutes. He read the note and was silent for a while. Then he said, "This is a warning. Or maybe a promise." Jeremiah, who was staying in a nearby house, also arrived. The whole cross is the symbol of the old resistance. But they were left for dead in the 1990s. Grace rose from her seat. Maybe not everyone died. The idea of a new force emerging from the past made everyone uneasy. What if there was a third force at play? Not the Circle, not the Truth Watchers, but another entity, older, quieter, and even more dangerous? At dawn, the city seemed different. The streets were too quiet. The mail didn't come through. The dogs didn't bark. The neighbors had their windows closed. Something hung in the air. An invisible tension. And then, at 8 o'clock sharp, the old school's loudspeakers began broadcasting a message. It was a female voice. Was it a recording? It was calm, measured, almost hypnotic. The trial begins now. All who hid the truth will have the chance to speak. All who manipulated will be confronted. And all who loved will be tested. The entire city heard it. And no one knew where the voice came from. Lucas turned on the radio. The same message was being broadcast on multiple frequencies. Eleanor's heart sank. Is this some kind of tribunal? Jeremiah shook his head. Not an ordinary tribunal. Something symbolic. Spiritual. Perhaps the survivors are watching us, testing our fidelity to the truth. That same day, files began mysteriously appearing in public places. USB sticks left on park benches, copies of tapes in mailboxes, envelopes on church doors. The contents: new recordings, confessions, plans, videos of powerful people discussing how to hide everything. It was as if someone were unleashing the truth. The media tried to cover it up, but it was too late. The people were now part of the narrative. Ordinary people, like Eleanor, became symbols. Lucas became known as the grandson of truth. And with that came new threats. But also unexpected allies. Among them, a woman named Ruth. Ruth was a woman in her late 90s. She lived in the mountains and never left her house. But she showed up at the local church with a letter from Harold. Yes, another letter. And in it said, "If everything falls apart, trust Ruth. She knows the way." Eleanor didn't know whether to cry or thank her. It was as if Harold had foreseen every step. Ruth said that Harold, in recent years, had been making secret visits to her. They discussed plans, maps, and risks. He knew that one day the judgment would come, and he wanted to prepare Eleanor for it. He said you were the light, the woman who would walk through the darkness with faith, and that Lucas would be the living torch. Eleanor took Ruth's hand. But why now? Why all this now? Ruth smiled sweetly. Because you've reached where no one else has. Because you've resisted fear. And because true love awakens forces the world has forgotten. Those words sparked something inside her. That night, Ruth stayed at Eleanor's house. She told stories of her youth, of her days fighting alongside Harold, and of the secrets she kept even from herself. And while everyone slept, there was a knock on the door. 3 rings. Short, quick, precise. Eleanor opened it slowly. On the other side, an envelope. And this time, no wax. No symbol. Just a sentence written in firm letters. Are you ready to know the ultimate truth? The note didn't say where or how, but inside was a piece of paper with a name, Sarah. Eleanor froze. Sarah was her daughter. Lucas's mother. Killed in a car accident over 15 years ago. Or so they said. She leaned against the door, nearly losing her balance. Lucas woke at the noise and ran to her. "Grandma," "What's wrong?" She simply handed him the note and said, "The story isn't over yet." The day after the note bearing the name Sarah was delivered, Eleanor could barely sleep. Her daughter's name echoed in her mind like a distant bell. The pain she thought she had buried returned with a vengeance. Sarah, her little girl, the one gone too soon. But what if she hadn't left? Lucas, seeing his mother's name on the paper, was speechless. "This can't be real," he murmured. He remembered little of her. He was only 8 years old when it all happened. But the memory of the burning car, the sirens, his grandmother's screams, still lingered in the back of his mind. And now, it all seemed like a lie. Ruth, her voice calm, confirmed what everyone feared to believe. Sarah was part of Harold's plan. She knew too much. And when the truth began to leak out, faking her death was the only way to protect her. Eleanor felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "You hid my daughter from me?" Ruth held her hand. "Not out of cruelty, but because if you knew, they would come after you too. Harold thought it was the only way." Eleanor pulled away, crying. The truth hurt more than any lie. Lucas stared at the ground, trying to process it. "My mother, is she alive?" The piece of paper bearing the name Sarah had a watermark in the bottom corner. A fleur-de-lis, a typical Louisiana symbol. Ruth confirmed, "She's in the heart of the state, in a secluded village called Belle Lumiere." Eleanor had never heard of it, but Grace recognized it. It's a place where time stands still, where people disappear and no one asks why. They decided to leave that day. Lucas wanted answers. Eleanor wanted her daughter back. And everyone knew it. The circle probably knew it too. Ruth handed Eleanor a locket with a small hidden compartment. "Here's her blood. It'll serve as confirmation, should you ever need to prove who she is." The journey was long. They drove for hours along deserted roads, swamps, and narrow bridges. With every mile, the air grew denser, more humid. Trees seemed to block the way. It was as if Louisiana itself hid ancient secrets within its soil. Eleanor prayed silently, asking for direction. They arrived in Belle Lumiere at dusk. A village with old houses, dirt streets, and a church in the center with a cracked bell. People watched them suspiciously. Few spoke, and those who did said little. Grace approached an elderly woman and asked for Sarah. The woman simply pointed toward the river. They followed the indicated path. The river cut through the village like a silver scar. On the bank stood a small wooden house, its windows covered by lace curtains. Eleanor felt her heart race. She recognized the architecture. Harold used to draw that house. It was the hideout he dreamed of building. Before knocking on the door, Eleanor took a deep breath. Her hands trembled. Her whole body seemed on alert. She closed her eyes and said, "Lord, if my daughter is behind this door, give me strength." Lucas placed his hand on her shoulder. "We are together." And then she knocked. The knocking echoed for seconds that felt like minutes. And then the door opened. Slowly, a woman appeared. Gray hair, weather-beaten skin, but her eyes. Those eyes were Sarah's. Eleanor fell to her knees. "Sarah." The woman was crying too. "Mom." The reunion was heartbreaking. They hugged so tightly it seemed they would never let go. Lucas watched from afar, his eyes brimming with tears. It was the first time he'd seen his mother as an adult. And even without words, I knew there was love there. A love that had survived pain, time, and lies. Sarah explained everything. After discovering the circle's plans, Harold helped her disappear. She assumed a new identity. She lived as a librarian in small towns, always watched over by silent allies. But she never knew her mother didn't know. "I thought you agreed to the plan." "I'm sorry, Mom." Eleanor sobbed. "Do you really think I'd let you disappear without a fight?" Sarah cried too. It was as if the years apart were exploding there, on that porch, under the humid Louisiana sky. But the moment of peace was short-lived. A distant gunshot brought them back to reality. Lucas was the first to react. "We're surrounded." Sarah ran inside and pulled a lever hidden behind a bookshelf. A ladder appeared on the living room floor. "This way. Harold built this." Discovering that Harold had prepared this very spot made Eleanor feel protected, even in his absence. The tunnel led them to a cabin in the middle of the swamp. There were supplies, radios, documents. Sarah transformed before them. From lost daughter to silent leader. "The circle already knows you've reached me. Now they'll try to erase the rest." Lucas looked at his mother as if meeting her for the first time. In the cabin, they found something surprising, a tape recorder with recent tapes, where Harold left messages for Sarah. In one of them, he said, "If Eleanor reaches you, it's because she's conquered all her fears. Tell her my biggest regret was not telling the truth while looking her in the eye." Eleanor listened in silence. Then she held the tape tightly. "I forgive him. And I forgive you too, Sarah. Because what brought us here was love." The two embraced again. Lucas held back tears. But then an alarm rang. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Drones hovered over the nearby forest. The hideout had been discovered. Grace, who had been guarding the perimeter with Frank, radioed, "They're coming. And they're not alone." It was now or never. Sarah revealed there was one more letter. One only Eleanor could read. It was hidden in a reliquary in the village church. They hurried back to the village, detouring along dirt paths and hidden routes. The church was empty, but the door was ajar. Entering, Eleanor smelled old wood and melted candles. On the altar, a reliquary bearing her family crest. Inside, an envelope bearing her name. Harold's last letter. The letter read, "If you've made it this far, it's because you've overcome everything. Ellie, I never stopped loving you. Never. Everything I've done has been for you. And even though I'm not there physically, I'm there for every step, every choice, every leap of faith. And now, the time has come to end this." Eleanor wept. But she felt at peace. Back at the cabin, everyone prepared for the final assault. Sarah, Lucas, Eleanor, Grace, Ruth, Frank, all ready to fight for the truth. But as the helicopters approached, something unexpected happened. The villagers, silent until then, formed a human barrier. With torches, with faith, with courage. The troop commander hesitated. They were a people armed with nothing but the truth. And inside, Eleanor held the cross Pastor Ben had given her months before. "Lord, guide us." And then, thunder split the sky. And with it, the beginning of the end. But the outcome was yet to come. And it would bring the final revelation. The thunder seemed to herald something greater than a storm. The forest fell silent, as if nature itself knew this moment was sacred. Eleanor, holding the cross, felt her heart beat with a new strength. It was fear, yes, but it was also courage and faith. The Circle's army was in position. Men with precision weapons, drones, encrypted communications. But something unnerved them, that crowd of ordinary people blocking their path. Women with rosaries. Men with flashlights. Children with handwritten signs, "Truth is our heritage." Inside, Sarah reviewed the evacuation plans. Lucas carried the most important documents. Grace helped Eleanor dress in a makeshift bulletproof vest. It was all very real. But it was also surreal. It felt like a movie. But it was life. And the moment was now. Ruth, with her cane, gathered everyone together and proposed a prayer. A prayer of war, of surrender, of light. Her words echoed off the walls of the cabin and in the hearts of everyone there. "May the Lord be our shield and our guide. May the truth come to light. And may the past finally be revealed." That's when a black truck appeared, slowly climbing the hill. It wasn't from the Circle's army, nor from the resistance. It was something new. When it stopped, the door opened, and out stepped a tall man in a light suit, with gray hair and an intense gaze. Eleanor clapped her hand over her mouth. It was him. It was Harold. No one knew what to say. Sarah took a step back. Lucas froze. Eleanor fell to her knees. He walked over to her, his eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sorry it took me so long," he said, his voice breaking. She was crying, unable to speak. He held her hands. I never left you. I just hid. The reunion was so powerful that even the soldiers hesitated. Outside, the commander watched through the telescopic sight. Abort the attack for now, he ordered. Inside, Harold explained everything. He had been captured, but never killed. A resistance group kept him alive by exchanging false information. He lived in hiding for over 10 years. He looked at Sarah. You were stronger than me, daughter. Then he looked at Lucas. And you are proof that it was all worth it. But then he revealed something no one expected. Something that would change everything. He said, the circle is not outside. It's inside. One of you is one of them. Tension exploded in the air. Everyone looked at each other. Ruth tightened her grip on her cane. Grace took a step back. Frank gripped his gun tightly. Lucas looked at Harold. Are you sure? Harold nodded. They planted someone among us from the beginning. To guide us and destroy us. From within. Silence. Eleanor tried to understand. But who? That's when the cabin door burst open. Frank pointed the gun. But it wasn't him who betrayed her. Not Grace. Not Ruth. It was Jeremiah. Yes. Her old friend. The man Eleanor respected. He raised his hands slowly. They got me before all this started. Jeremiah wept. I just wanted to protect you. But they threatened me. They used my family. I leaked information without knowing how far it would go. Harold lowered his head. You betrayed Sarah. You betrayed me. Jeremiah fell to his knees. I never wanted this. I just wanted to survive. The choice was stark. Execute Jeremiah, or forgive him. Sarah stepped forward. My father is alive. I am alive. And even with everything he did, you, Jeremiah, are just another victim. Like all of us. Eleanor stepped closer. She touched his shoulder. But it can't stay between us. Jeremiah accepted the decision. He handed over his radio and all the circle's communication codes. Then he walked out of the hut, hands in the air. The soldiers arrested him. The commander confirmed over the radio, he was the bridge. Cut the bridge. And so, from within, the circle began to crumble. But the most shocking moment was yet to come. When Harold opened the high-security folder and revealed the final recording. A video. In it, the nation's leaders appeared in a secret meeting, planning to eliminate everyone involved in Operation Redemption. But there was one face no one expected to see, that of the current President of the United States. Lucas was shocked. Eleanor sat down. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut. Oh my God! This is it. Grace stared at the screen, silent. Ruth made the sign of the cross. It was irrefutable proof. But now they knew the enemy was bigger. And closer. Taller. More invisible. The group decided they needed to release it immediately. But Harold hesitated. Releasing this now might cause civil war. Sarah replied, but hiding it would be repeating their mistake. Eleanor was silent. Then she said, we are not called to fear. We are called to truth. And truth sets us free. And so, with everyone gathered, they broadcast. By radio, by internet, by shortwave. The recording exploded onto the news. And the world reacted. Some with indignation. Others with denial. But no one could pretend any longer. The truth was there. Hard. Raw. And alive. That same night, troops began to abandon the circle. Officers surrendered. Towns rose up. And Eleanor, sitting on the cabin porch, gazed up at the starry sky with a deep sigh. Harold is back. Sarah is back. Lucas has found his purpose. And I have fulfilled my mission. But just when she thought the worst was over, she received another message. A note left on the edge of her bed. Unsigned. It just said, the storm has passed. But the darkness still whispers. She closed her eyes. She knew the fight wasn't over. It had just changed form. The final revelation of the day would come with Sarah. As she leaned against Eleanor, she said, there's something you need to know. I didn't come back alone. Eleanor stared at her in confusion. And then, through the door, a girl with brown eyes, curly hair, and a shy smile walked in. "Hi, Grandma." Time stood still. Eleanor clapped her hand over her mouth. "You are?" Sarah nodded. "This is Lily, your granddaughter." Eleanor fell to her knees again. She was crying like a child. And Lily hugged her. "Mommy spoke so much about you." This was more than a reunion. It was redemption. It was hope. It was a miracle. Outside, Harold watched. Lucas wept silently. Grace smiled. Ruth prayed. And the village finally breathed. But in the depths of the forest, eyes watched. Silent. Patient. Because the truth had won. But the shadows still waited for another chance. The forecast predicted rain, but no one could have imagined what was about to happen. The sky began to darken even in the morning, as if the weather were in mourning. Eleanor looked out the cabin window while holding the hand of Lily, her newly revealed granddaughter. The girl's silence was profound, but filled with a wisdom befitting her age. "You look like your mother and your grandfather," she said. Lily smiled shyly, but then looked up at the sky seriously. "It's going to rain a lot today, Grandma." Eleanor thought it was strange. It was as if the girl knew something else. Sarah explained that, since she was little, Lily had a special sensitivity. She sensed things before they happened. She dreamed about people she hadn't met yet. And when she said she dreamed about Eleanor before she met her, no one doubted her. Around 4 in the afternoon, the first drops began to fall. The sound was intense, like fingers tapping angrily on the tiles. Frank checked the radio and noticed the signal was starting to fade. Ruth, with her unwavering faith, began lighting candles and placing cloths in the windowsills. Grace checked the food supply. Everyone knew this would be no ordinary night. The wind came in strong. Trees began to creak, and water invaded the dirt paths, turning them into makeshift rivers. The village prepared itself as best it could. But deep down, everyone knew this storm was more than climatic. It was spiritual. It was symbolic. It was a response from heaven and a test from the earth. Eleanor called everyone together to pray. They sat in a circle in the living room of the cabin, each holding the other's hand. "Lord, may this storm not take our faith, nor our lives. May it only cleanse what needs to be cleaned. May we be strong, even if everything collapses around us." And everyone said, "Amen." The power went out at 7:20. The radio stopped working. Cell phones lost signal. The world seemed to shrink until it fit within those 4 walls. Lucas turned on flashlights, and Lily suggested drawing stars on the ceiling with fluorescent chalk. "If the sky is dark outside, we'll create a sky inside." And everyone smiled tenderly. But at 8:34, everything changed. A massive crash shook the cabin structure. A tree fell right onto the roof, creating a crater that sent water pouring in furiously. Lily screamed in fright, and Eleanor shielded her with her body. "Down, everyone!" Harold shouted, taking command. Running, they made it down to the basement. But it was starting to flood. Sarah organized supplies, Frank brought blankets, and Ruth distributed verses written on pieces of paper. Eleanor knelt with Lily in her lap and said, "If God brought us this far, He won't abandon us now." And the little girl nodded. The hours passed slowly. The water rose slowly. The sound of the storm mingled with sounds coming from within, Lucas's suppressed crying, the whispering of prayers, the sound of Eleanor's heart, stronger than ever. "This storm is just another ordeal," she thought. But then, a new sound appeared. And it wasn't rain. Someone was walking outside. In the rain. Heavy, rhythmic footsteps. As if searching for something. Or someone. Lily flinched. "He's here," she said. Eleanor asked, "Who, my flower?" And Lily answered softly, "The man from the dream. The one who wants to take me." The silence that followed was even more frightening than the thunder. Suddenly, the basement door was forced open. Someone knew they were there. Harold readied the rifle he'd kept hidden since the mission days. Lucas grabbed a flashlight and pointed it at the stairs. "Who's there?" No answer. Just the water, and the sound of something dragging upstairs. Eleanor pulled Lily close. Grace closed her eyes and began to pray aloud. Ruth held a wooden cross. Sarah whispered to Lucas, "If it's him, he knows everything." Lucas nodded. And then, like a snap, the door opened. But it wasn't what they expected. It was Jeremiah. Wet, bruised, and desperate. "They're coming for the girl," he said, gasping. "The Circle has heard about her. They think she's the next key." Eleanor screamed, "You gave her away?" Jeremiah fell to his knees. "No. I ran from them. But they're coming. And they won't stop." Time seemed to speed up. The water rose. And lightning illuminated fearful faces. Harold locked the basement door with an iron bar. "We will resist. As we did before. But now, with more love than anger." Sarah took Lily's necklace and wrapped it around her own hand. "They won't take my daughter. Not anymore." And Eleanor felt a strength grow within her. "She's not just yours. She's ours. And she's God's." In the midst of her panic, Lily spoke again. But with preternatural calm. "They think I'm the key. But it's not me. It's her." She pointed at Eleanor. A silence fell across the room. Everyone stared at her. Eleanor was speechless. "Me? But why?" Lily smiled. "Because you were the only one who never stopped loving. And that changes everything." The girl's words transformed fear into light. Eleanor felt a peace wash over her. A sacred conviction. "Then let's fight this. With love." She picked up her Bible and began reciting Psalm 91. Each word was like a wall rising around them. The storm raged, but no longer touched them. Outside, the Circle group advanced cautiously. But as they approached the cabin, something began to happen. The wind changed direction. Trees fell, but in reverse. The ground shook. And then, without explanation, the forces retreated. The men disappeared into the woods. And silence returned. The storm began to subside at 4 in the morning. The water receded. The sky slowly cleared. When they emerged from the basement, they saw the trail of destruction. But the cabin was standing. The surrounding houses were destroyed. But this one stood firm. Ruth said, "The Lord built this house. That's why it stood." In the mud, boot prints. And a wet piece of paper with a single word written on it, "It's not over yet." Eleanor took the paper, dried it, and put it away. She looked at Lily and said, "You were right, my flower. But now, Grandma is ready too." And with that, everyone knew, the real battle was yet to come. The sun finally appeared after days of storm, and its golden light seemed to heal the earth's wounds. The city was still breathing heavily, but it held firm. Eleanor walked through the mud-covered streets, hand in hand with Lily. The damaged houses, the toppled streetlights, everything looked like part of a battlefield. But there was life. There was hope. In the central square, residents were beginning to gather. Some carried white flags. Others, candles. Ruth led a public prayer. "The storm has passed, but the invisible war still surrounds us. May God grant us discernment to know when to fight, and when to love." Eleanor felt something calling her to something greater. One last step. Harold, sitting with Sarah, was still reeling from their reunion. His eyes spoke volumes: love, guilt, gratitude. But also fear. "The Circle isn't completely destroyed, Ellie. They retreat to rewatch. And they will return." Eleanor listened intently, but she already knew what she had to do. Something neither of them would dare. She got up, went to the old town school, now abandoned, and wrote a giant message on the wall in red paint: "The truth lives here." It was a challenge, an invitation, a summons, and, at the same time, a trap. Eleanor knew the Circle would come. But she would not back down. Lucas tried to dissuade her. "Grandma, it's dangerous. You've already done enough." Eleanor smiled tenderly. "Precisely because of that. Because there are still children in this town. And no child should grow up in fear." Sarah hugged her tightly. Lily held her hand and said, "You are light." And then, Eleanor decided what she would do. She called a public meeting at the church. She invited everyone, even those who had previously been afraid to get involved. She said loud and clear, "I'm not a politician. I'm not a heroine. I'm a grandmother. I'm a woman. I'm a daughter of God. And if evil wants to silence us, it'll have to go through me." Silence fell over the place. And then, applause. That night, she placed a chair right in the center of the square. She sat there with a Bible on her lap and a flashlight pointed at the sky. She said, "They watched us in the dark. Now let them see us in the light." And she stood there, alone. The whole town watched. Some said it was madness. Others, an act of faith. But no one remained indifferent. In the second hour, Grace appeared with a chair and sat beside her. Then Ruth. Then Frank. Soon, dozens of people, all with flashlights, pointed skyward. The square became a sea of light. The entire city lit up. And in the shadows, the watching eyes turned away. From atop a hill, two men from the circle watched it all. One said, "She's disarming fear." The other replied, "And if the people are no longer afraid, we no longer have control." That night, the report sent to headquarters was clear: mission compromised. Infiltration unfeasible. Popular resistance unwavering. Eleanor didn't know it, but she felt it in her heart. She stayed there until dawn. When the sun rose, she got up and said, "Now it's your turn." She returned home and slept like she hadn't slept in decades. In peace. Because she knew her gesture had planted a seed that no one would ever uproot. The following week, the city organized an event called Eleanor's Light. Plaques were installed with quotes about her courage. Schools created murals depicting her story. And most importantly, young people began asking questions, researching, and wanting to understand the past. Because when one woman stands up, many others discover they can too. Eleanor didn't seek glory. But her life became a symbol of faith that doesn't give in, of love that doesn't run away, of courage that protects, even when everything tells her to retreat. And the most surprising thing was the visit she received one sunny morning. A woman in a blue suit, with gray hair, knocking on the door. She was a senator. She had seen the files, researched the names. And she wanted Eleanor to speak in Washington. She wanted her story to be heard. But Eleanor graciously declined. "I don't need a stage. I need time with my granddaughter. And with God." The woman understood. And promised, "We will tell your story with respect." Months passed. The city became a national example of reconciliation. A new community center opened on the site of the former radio station. They called it the House of Truth. And at the entrance, a simple statue of a woman sitting in a chair, holding a Bible and a flashlight. Lucas began giving lectures at schools. Sarah returned to writing. Harold, despite his frailty, became a counselor for young veterans. Grace led weekly prayers. Ruth, despite her frailty, became a symbol of the longevity of faith. And Lily was now the future, with a sparkle in her eyes that lit up every corner of the city. But Eleanor remained silent. She planted roses. She baked cookies. She sewed quilts with embroidered verses. She received visitors, listened to stories. And every night, she sat on the porch with Lily. They watched the stars and asked the same question: did the world get a little better today? And one late afternoon, when the sky was orange, Lily asked, "Grandma, are you afraid of dying?" Eleanor smiled and replied, "No, because I know I left enough light here. And because I know the love I gave will live on in you." The little girl nestled in her lap and stayed there, at peace. Eleanor's gesture, sitting alone with the lantern, became a local legend. A milestone. A turning point. A silent miracle. Because sometimes, all it takes to change the world is a woman refusing to hide. All it takes is a light, lit in the darkness. Have you ever stopped to think about the power of a single decision? Eleanor wasn't a soldier, a politician, or a secret agent. She was just a grandmother. An ordinary woman, simple-hearted, but with unshakable faith and courage no one expected. And that was exactly what changed the fate of an entire city, and perhaps a country. What would have happened if she had remained silent? What if you had accepted the lies? What if you hadn't gone after your grandson? Maybe the truth would never have come out. Maybe lives would have continued to be snuffed out by the shadows. But she chose to act. She chose to love. She chose to fight with the only weapon no one can destroy: light. Now, tell me, and you? What would you do in her place? If your family was at risk, would you face it like she did? Have you ever felt like your voice doesn't matter? That your faith is too small in the eyes of the world? For today, I tell you with all my heart, it matters. A lot. Every gesture of love, every sincere prayer, every decision not to give up, all of this builds a legacy. And maybe one day someone will be inspired by what you did. You may never hear your name in the newspapers, but your story will resonate in the hearts of those you touched. Because the light you turn on could be someone's last hope. If this story spoke to you, if it touched you in any way, share your thoughts here in the comments. Have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever had to make a decision that seemed small, but changed everything? What would you do if you were in Eleanor's shoes? And, of course, if you believe in the power of these stories, if you want to continue learning, growing, and being moved, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and follow the next chapters of this journey. Because this is just the beginning. Maybe you're thinking your life is too ordinary to inspire anyone. But remember, Eleanor thought so too. And in the end, it was she who lit the flashlight in the middle of the darkness. And you? Will you let your light shine too?